Three, two, one.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of our It's Cool to Care series. Today our guests are James and Jens from We Make Change, an amazing organization that we personally work closely with. So I'll let you guys do the introduction first. So James, do you want to go first?
30 seconds. I'm timing.
Here we go. Right. So I'm James, co-founder CEO of We Make Change, and We Make Change exists to give you the power to change the world. Now, that's a big phrase, but actually, how do we do that in reality? So the way that we do that is we connect individuals and employees with social enterprises across the world where they can use their skills to support the causes that they care about.
Nice.
There you go.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Jens, and I'm COO at We Make Change. And I guess I don't have to tell you what We Make Change is now, but I met James in New York 4 years ago, and now we're making change. So that's my introduction.
Love that. So thanks guys so much for joining us. I know you both have super busy schedules, and so thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today. So let's dive right into the topic of the day, social enterprises. I wanted to give a little background on what a social enterprise is for those who may not know or is unclear of. So according to Social Enterprise UK, definition-wise, a social enterprise is a business that has a clear social or environmental mission and operates in the interest of your social mission. Some stats provided by the World Economic Forum says that only 45% of social enterprises remain operational between 1 to 3 years. And then on top of that, only 8.7% lasted more than 4 years. So those are really, staggering statistics. What would you say are some of the main challenges of starting up your own social enterprise?
Sure. Well, one of the interesting things about us in some ways is that we're not only a social enterprise ourselves, but we support social enterprises across the world too by connecting them with volunteers. And so the definition that we use, both for ourselves and the organizations we support, is effectively they are businesses with a social mission. And what that means is that actually purpose rather than profit is absolutely central to what they do. That's the reason why they exist. And although there are lots of organizations now who talk about the impact that they make or talk about sustainability and those kinds of things, often those types of businesses aren't typically social enterprises because it's not actually the core of what they do is making impact. It's just an addition to what they're looking to do, which is generally to make money in that kind of way. And the thing that's super exciting for us is that there's an entirely new generation of entrepreneurs that are creating an entirely new generation of companies as social enterprises because purpose really is at the core of what they do. And most of the social enterprises that we support in that vein are very much startups. They tend to be somewhere in the range of somewhere between, we describe it as like 6 months to kind of 3 years old, if not slightly longer. And they often have very small teams, either, 1 or 2 sort of full-time founders, and then a kind of volunteer supporting team beyond that. And for those types of social enterprises, the biggest challenges that they face are that, and this is one of the reasons why We Make Change came into existence, was that they often find it really hard to afford people with the skills they need to grow their impact. So they're at this stage where they really want to grow and scale, but they don't have the capital to be able to invest in those people, in technology, product, or platform to actually enable them to get to that scale as well. And there are a whole bunch of other challenges that come with it, but as you're starting up, that's one of the biggest challenges. But as we've seen through the types of social enterprises we support and the volunteers we connect them with, is that there are so many people who are willing and able to use their skills to help that actually you can overcome some of those challenges quite easily and effectively through connecting with skilled volunteers as well.
It's also, I would say that a lot of the focus is always about this funding thing. I need funding. It's always focused on funding so I can do what I want or get the people with the skills that I need. And since we focus on the UN Sustainable Development Goals and we only have 9 years left to achieve them, we need to accelerate that. And we believe there is a lot of value in the skills that people can offer to help accelerate this and support these social enterprises, so we can, in the end, also transform the system. So in the future, all businesses are led by purpose instead of profit. And those are the kind of companies that people want to work for. And perhaps that could even change sort of the market itself, when corporations start seeing that, oh, people want to work for a company that makes a change. We need to make our change ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like, you know, there's deeper reality behind all these kind of issues that all these social enterprises are supporting, whether it's environmental issues or social issues. And it goes back to the kind of systemic issues and, you know, the social ecosystems and the government. But at the same time, like, to really implement change, it comes from communities, it comes from consumers, businesses, brands, governments. Like I always say this, it's not one person, it's not the government, it's not businesses, it's not society, it's all of us together, you know. So it's just I think, yeah, hopefully the future will kind of move towards more social enterprise and more business kind of purposeful ways of living. I think that goes down to a lot of pressure for the actual social entrepreneurs, because it's like, once you start making impact, you're going to want to start making more and more and more. And I think that's where, you know, that leads to kind of what you posted about social entrepreneurs and mental health the other day, James. You know, the statistics were about 50%, right, for depression and burnout.
Yeah. So, because coming to Jens's point in relation to that as well, is that the thing about starting your own social enterprise is that when we live in a system where fundamentally, really, the ways that, you know, capital and investment work for organizations at almost any level is predicated on financial returns, is that trying to change that system through social enterprise is where you're trying to harness these existing market powers towards a more purposeful and impactful end.
Yeah.
And I always say that it's harder to make change than it is to make money. And it's even harder to make change and money at the same time. And that's the kind of, you know, world that we live in. And one of the reasons why there are such high rates of, you know, statistics in relation to burnout and mental health issues is partly because one of the big things that social entrepreneurs lack is time. And that's because you've got, you know, a million different things that you could be doing at any one moment. Also, generally, there are a lot of particularly young founders who don't really know what they should or should not be doing as well. So you've always got that uncertainty in your head too. And in addition to that, you have a huge number of other kind of financial pressures that are burdened on you as you're trying to operate within this market mechanism. So you have all of these different forces pulling at you at the same time. And the way that I see a lot of social entrepreneurs get through some of those toughest moments, I've got a disproportionate number of friends who are social entrepreneurs for this reason. We talk about these issues a lot, is that if you are so driven by that sense of purpose, there is nothing that's going to stop you from trying to achieve it. You're not necessarily going to achieve the change that you want to see, but there's nothing that's going to stop you trying. Yeah. And I think that goes back to a quote, we might come on to philosophy in a bit of detail, from Nietzsche, but is, to paraphrase, is that for someone who has a why, they can basically suffer anyhow. And that's what it feels like along the time. No matter how much you have to pivot, you have to change kind of along the way, actually you'll still be driven by that sense of purpose. But again, that doesn't diminish those other pressures that can lead to some of those mental health anxieties as well.
Yeah. And I think it's also, you know, the balance between trying to actually create a brand, because at the end of the day, you have to play the game in the field like any other competitor. You know, just because you have a purpose, you also have to learn how to, I guess, run a brand or like a business. And then on top of that, how can you leverage your impact and how can you kind of really take that opportunity to build it and grow it? So I think it's like tackling two, I guess, like completely different things as well, because your impact and how you build your impact is very different to then how are you going to get your customers, or how are you going to, you know, actually scale as a brand. So yeah.
Yeah, the system is also quite black and white. I remember one of our members based in the US, and over there it's like, it would be the perfect country for social enterprises, because there is a lot of like civic engagement. People do a lot of volunteering, a lot of change in their communities. But it's just this understanding that, okay, either you're a capitalist company or you're an NGO. You cannot be anything in between. Like, it's like, oh, you're saying you make change, but you also make profit. Like, that makes no sense at all. So I think there are a lot of weird boxes that we always have to fit into. And I myself was thinking that as well, because I have a background in political science. And I thought, oh, I want to change the world. How can I change the world? Well, I have to do it maybe through politics, or work for an institution somewhere in my country, or internationally, the UN or the EU, something like that, to feel like I could make a change. But then I realized that, well, anyone, we all of us has to do something to make a change, as you said, Joey. So the point is that if we just rely on the governments to make the change for us, and maybe the EU or the UN, we're never going to reach the UN Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. It might have been the states and all the governments who agreed on the resolution 2015 about the SDGs, but if they have to do it by themselves, we're never going to reach the goals. So we have to engage all parties, whether they're NGOs or companies or states. We have to work together.
Yeah, you're right. You actually articulated that so much better than I did. I was trying to make a point earlier about the stigma, and I think I didn't quite get the point across as well as you did. But you're right in terms of, like capitalists, or you're making money. And it's like, I think there's a stigma that you can't be both, because if you're making money, then are you really making change? But a lot of businesses are. And I think Thuta and I question all the time. And I think, we do a buy one, give one with socks, but we also try and support other social issues. And every day I'm like, are we really making a difference with socks? But then we go out and do outreaches, and we actually speak to people, experiencing homelessness, and we ask them, because we want to validate. We're still such an early stage company that we do have the opportunity to pivot if the impact wasn't there. But then we hear people say, like after 2 days, their socks get wet, or their socks get holes and their socks get dirty, or they have like foot issues and cuts and wounds and stuff. And then that puts us back to be like, okay, this is, some kind of validation that we are making a difference. We're not going to eradicate homelessness with socks, but it's all of our little bits put together that, does really help. And just because we're a business that makes profit doesn't mean we don't prioritize impact and purpose over anything we do.
Yeah. And I think it's also about finding the balance too, right? There's lots of people that want to drive change, but maybe don't have like the financial, capabilities to do so. And there's another like stigma around, social enterprises not making enough money to be able to support themselves and stuff. And we know firsthand as well, we didn't like pay ourselves. Joey and I still don't, pay ourselves a regular salary.
Tell them that, I'm joking.
We're fully transparent here. So
yeah, no, we are bootstrapping, but it's a challenge that we want to take. But it's true, you're right. Like, the cost for running a social enterprise is so much higher, because then you have to, make impact. And I think that goes back to maybe, James's statistics, not your statistics, but, the statistics. Yeah. James did a study. But, that probably goes back to the kind of burnout and depression, because then maybe people are constantly thinking like, I need to also be making a living, but I want to make impact, but I also want to grow my brand and scale it. And I don't have enough time and resources. I don't have people, just loads of,
loads of challenges.
Note to the fellow COO, Thuta, that we are also very transparent. I mean, nobody who make change are getting paid either. So it's a challenge.
Really?
It's part of the journey. It's part of the process to kind of getting there. And one of the things in relation to some of the points you made, Joan, as well, Thuta, is that I think when we kind of think about the ways in which people have like made impact throughout history, coming to Jens's point of, about politics and about, working in the charity sector, that kind of thing, is that, well, I started in the charity sector, and there's loads of amazing work that goes on there. But for me, the single most effective thing that any one individual can do, particularly of our generation, like the largest, most connected, most highly educated, is really either start your own social enterprise, or a greater starting point is volunteering for one. And the reason that is because as much as there are these challenges with social enterprises, and a lot of the work that we do goes around like verifying and checking impact that's being made, is that they're actually making impact. So for you as an individual, there can be so many barriers to either volunteering with a traditional kind of like charity or organization, either because it doesn't support your causes, doesn't need your professional skills, doesn't fit with your schedule, Whereas actually with this new generation of social enterprises is that, you know, basically any social enterprise needs pretty much any professional skill on whatever time basis you can kind of give it. And there are so many that support all these different causes that it really is the most effective way a generation that is, you know, basically money poor but skill rich can contribute to addressing these big challenges. But coming to one of those big anxieties, which is true as much as it is for kind of individual volunteers as well as social entrepreneurs, is that the challenges that the world faces just seem so huge.
Yeah.
Joey, like you're saying, you know, you're wondering, you know, give, you know, buy one, give one. Like you're almost kind of thinking, yeah, we haven't ended homelessness.
Yeah, it's not enough. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's never enough. But to me, that's the thing which it can get you into a position of anxiety around, like, and frankly, at extreme levels, you know, depression, because you feel helpless. But if on a day-by-day basis, you feel like you are giving what you can to making that change you want to see, and you really see it, then that's when you can, you know, lay your head on your pillow at night and think, have a clear conscience, and then just literally every day taking step by step, doing what you can to address those kinds of challenges. As Jen says, we need to accelerate, but, you know, as long as we're doing that on a day-by-day basis, we can try and alleviate some of those tensions that come from taking on some of these big challenges as well.
We need to also, inspire this sort of change in the world and inspire kind of this generation that we want to see change. And I want to go a bit back to those 4 years ago in New York with James when we met. We met at the Model United Nations conference. And if you don't know what that is, it's where you meet up, usually university students, people also do it in high school, and pretend it's a role play that you are in the United Nations. You're maybe in the Security Council representing a country, and so you just play that country and you write a resolution together trying to find solutions in the world. But what we thought was interesting that, okay, people want to spend their money to go to New York to attend a conference like this for 4 or 5 days with a lot of other young people who also want to see some change in the world. It's like, if people want to do that, imagine how much change we could make in the world, also through social entrepreneurship, instead of it always being politics is the solution, but politics is just not the solution. We just can't make a substantial change through politics. It can help a little bit, but we need to do it ourselves.
Yeah, so I kind of want to bring back to what you guys are doing at We Make Change. Really incredible. And you've already kind of touched on, you know, how you help link volunteers and social enterprises, which is amazing. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about other things that you do as well? I know you host events and webinars, like educational content as well, that you share with other people, in case, you know, if there are any potential volunteers listening on the other side.
Well, for potential volunteers, if you're out there and you want to make a change somehow, I mean, we have that little exercise, James and I, for people to think about, like, we say causes, skills, and time. So you think about what causes do you care about, because everyone cares about something, whether it's climate change, gender equality, quality education. You figure out what you really care about, and then you figure out, what are my skills? Maybe I have some specific skills. Maybe I'm developing skills through university or something like that. So what are the skills that I have that I can contribute with? And then you figure out how much time do you have, maybe 5 hours a week, maybe 10 hours a week, maybe, for instance, if you're in university, you might have flexible schedules. So sometimes you have more time, sometimes you have finals and not so much time. Once you figure out those things, you can just go on the We Make Change platform, apply to any of the projects that we have, or join one of our change days. So the change days are kind of one-off volunteering events. In most cases, people do want to continue volunteer beyond that day, but we match change makers with social enterprises, and then throughout the whole day, they work together on some specific tasks. So it's we think that the events are great and fun, and you can actually make a lot of change in just a few hours. And you've also tried that yourself at Leo. So that's a bit about what we do, but I'm going to also give the word to James.
Well, so that's basically technically what we do. And the philosophy behind it is that we basically want to make volunteering as fun, effective, and flexible as possible. And the way that we do that is on both sides. So for the individual, we want to enable anyone anywhere to be able to use their skills to support the causes they care about. And then for the social enterprise, we want to enable them to get the skills they need to grow their impact when they need them. And so whether it be through projects or through change days, these are kind of two different ways that we aim to achieve that. And to give you an idea of like how, as a social enterprise ourselves, we've developed those concepts and come to that learning, is that, you know, we've basically been in some form of existence for about 4 years. And it's only really in the last sort of year or so that we've really solidified what that model is, how we ourselves are going to make that impact. And the reason that we kind of can take that amount of learning is that you're always trying to really find out what is kind of the secret sauce, which will keep people coming back and also leads to that impact as well. So we've launched projects from our very beginning, but over the last 9 months, we've actually just launched now over 170 projects at this point, I believe, because we've done all that learning over 3 years. And now we're running change days. We only started change days at the beginning of, at the end of last year in 2020. And now we're kind of, even in the next month or so, we're running about 4 change days alone. So things are growing pretty quickly. And it's when you start to understand how these models work and then you refine them, that you can then actually really start to replicate and grow that impact as well.
Nice. Yeah, we actually we have a few, so we're growing our Leho team, and I think this is the first time where we've had people where we can just give tasks to and really, you know, full responsibilities without like hovering or being like, or monitoring them, or like, you know, it's just like a bit of a relief. And they're all from We Make Change. Jens and James didn't pay us to say this, but you know, it is an amazing yeah, what you guys are doing is just so great. And you know, you've connected us to so many great volunteers, people helping with Leho, and we're really excited. We had our first team meeting yesterday and it just felt like just a bit different because, you know, me and Theta like work together every day, but then having, you know, more people there with their great ideas and their great skills without having to like train them or anything is just, you know, such a relief. And it's just so, yeah, it's so great. So
yeah, well,
sponsored by
yeah. Well, I tell you something in relation to that though, is that when we started We Make Change, it was just a few of us with this idea, but actually at the end of it, what happened was that we needed to build our own volunteer team to grow it. And so we basically had a few adverts out for volunteer roles, and we had 200 applicants to join our volunteer team in 4 weeks.
Yeah, wow, that's crazy.
And that's where the whole kind of almost validation started. And then it's during that time where we've been building and refining how we grow and manage our own volunteer team that we now enable other social enterprises to do the same as well. So we've had that same feeling, worked with so many amazing people. We've had like literally over 150 people in the We Make Change team at any one point.
Amazing. Yeah.
And yeah, it's just incredible, both the relief they can give you, as you say, but also the impact that they can make as well. Because ultimately, they generally have far more expertise than say we do in a lot of areas.
that we can learn a lot from them, indeed. And also it's interesting because we're in our team, it's pretty diverse, so people from all kinds of different countries, so it's very meaningful work.
I was about to say, I was like, I love how you have volunteers from just like all over the world. It's crazy. And you know, with our Leho application, there were so many different people from, you know, all different places in the world, and it was just really, really nice to see. So yeah,
in a way sorry in a way I feel like, you know, I'm not sure how long you guys have been running the virtual volunteers program, but in a way, you know, being in lockdown and stuff, I feel like opened up like the range of people that can, you know, volunteer for these social enterprises. And yeah, I mean, that's, I guess, one positive thing we're getting out of this pandemic, that we're a lot more, you know, we're able to communicate with people across the world more. It's not just like physical events and interactions, and it's not limited to that. So yeah, I think it's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why one of the things that I personally have found it's partly powerful about not just what we do, but the kind of the sense of, oh, this really means something, is that when we started to go into lockdowns and people were starting to see how all these other different social issues were magnified in addition to the sort of pandemic itself.
Yeah.
Is that you had these two, these converging factors of so many people who basically had, frankly, either more time because, they're working from home so they don't have to commute, or they've been furloughed, or in some cases, sadly, laid off. So they've got more time to give. In addition to that, you also see a whole range of different social issues, racial inequality and other forms of social injustice that come to the forefront. And added to that is that we happen to be living at a time where a lot of people are connected in a, through the internet and globally. So each of those factors has enabled us to really grow our own impact, is the way that we see it. We don't really see it as, it's sort of beneficial for us as an organization. It's an opportunity for us to enable more people to make the change they want to see. And the convergence of those factors aren't things that are going to go away quickly either, because even though, hopefully we'll get past this pandemic, is that more people will be working from home than they ever have done before. More people are continuing to be connected. And I think this is part of an awakening of a generation to say, we just can't wait for these challenges to be solved. And we can't wait for another pandemic or crisis to come in order to address them as well. So that's what gives me some hope in the future too. And I think if we can play our part in helping to, enable more people to be part of that movement, to make some of that impact, then yeah, excited to see where it can really go from there too.
Yeah. And and you're so right. Like, with the pandemic, I feel like we're bringing more communities together. And, even in the interviews with our volunteers, like, they all came for one thing, and it was to make change, which is exactly, the name of your company. So I think, yeah, it's just really amazing to see, because I think when we, before the pandemic, we were connected to a lot of startups and stuff, all from different kind of, like techie startups, fashion, everything. But now it's just, we are really building our network of startups that we know that are, making change. And it's just really nice to kind of go through and just talk to them about, what all the struggles are. And, we've now referred a few people to We Make Change. I saw the People Project on there as well. So it's just like a really nice way to kind of share, your community, but also everyone's going through the same thing. We're all here to do one thing, and it's to make change. So I'm really sounding like a paid sponsor ad for you guys.
It's awesome.
But no, I love it. Yeah. And that leads me to kind of, because of the pandemic and because of more people wanting to, I guess, make change, what do you feel, or what do you both kind of think the future of, I guess, sustainable, or I guess, the future of consumption will go, like conscious consumption, whether it's people purchasing from more brands that have a social mission? Do you think that's going to kind of grow and there's going to be more demand for that, or what are your thoughts?
Well, we hope so. I mean, we believe we play our part in it by highlighting social enterprises making a change in the world, featuring social entrepreneurs, doing webinars and stuff. I've been speaking at some universities as well, but spreading the awareness, giving people this power, especially young people, our generation, because there is still this, you feel like there's this gap, like people older than me are always like smarter. I have to adapt to the system. I mean, I need a job, so I need to do something for someone to hire me, because otherwise I will not survive in life. I think that we can influence this, and we've had the opportunity to do that also during the pandemic, because more and more people are going online, because you can just, the only thing you do is be home pretty much. In certain countries, you couldn't even leave, there'd be a curfew. So you sit online and look around, and more and more companies, but also investors, think more about the impact that companies can have. So personally, I think the future is actually looking bright in these terms. And I think that people will think more about, or be aware that they can actually make a difference, not just like buying the stuff that they buy, like, but also the places that they want to work. Be more picky with that. I think that the future will be better, and now our generation is kind of waking up and kind of learning
hardcore activists.
Yeah,
well, I think
kind of.
yeah, well, I think that's the thing where it's kind of like the idea. An activist used to be someone who would like protest on the street for a cause.
Yeah.
Right. The thing that kind of excites me is that, well, maybe a relatively controversial point, but in some countries now, protest is a very ineffective form of impact.
Yeah.
We've seen that in the UK, massive protests against huge issues, and either nothing happens or the opposite of what people are protesting against happens in a lot of cases. And a lot of people, particularly of our generation as well, are just not really turned on by the idea of like walking around, you know, like the streets of London, holding up a sign and like shouting at someone you can't see. And whether it be through the things that you buy as like a conscious consumer, or, you know, volunteering your skills, or, you know, or where you work, you know, people are starting to see that impact more and more. But I think talking again about this kind of like system we operate in, is that we are deliberately alienated from the impact that our actions have on a day-to-day basis. So to give you some examples, when we go to the supermarket and you purchase a product, you have almost no idea either where it's from. You can look, you know, it's almost mandatory for it to be labeled, but it doesn't really mean anything. It's just a name on a label. You don't know what conditions that person has been working under, and you don't know what environmental impact that's been made. The only way you know that is when what I would describe as, you know, conscious brands highlight those things, but no one shouts about the fact that, oh, this is a product that uses unsustainable palm oil, or these people weren't paid a certain wage. Is that companies can still get away with not highlighting those factors. And, you know, one of the things that people are talking about a lot recently is like the documentary Seaspiracy.
That's what I was just thinking. Right? Yeah.
And then what even happens is when you see the label, which is meant to show that this is a sustainable product, or, you know, made in certain ways, is that you can't even trust that. And it's almost like this kind of, we really need to get to this point where that distance between our decision as a consumer, as a voter, you know, as just an individual and a citizen, and the impact that makes, we need to reduce that distance so that we really see that in a direct way. And in a way, Leho does part of that, right? Because you're saying, well, you buy one from us and we give one to a homeless person, and you share some of those stories and some of the impact that's been made. You're deliberately reducing that distance so that people can see that impact. But again, we've got a long way to go. And the key thing is, you can't just do it through one of those means. You can't just buy something differently and vote for something in an entirely different capacity, right? And then work for a company that's doing that, or have your pension funding, you know, certain organizations who are making certain impact. Like, each of these things is a holistic approach. And the amazing thing is, none of those things require you to go out onto the street.
Yeah. Right. I also think it's like playing a bit by the, you know, the rules of the market. There are some people who preach a lot about, you know, capitalism and the market will solve all the issues. So it's playing a bit by those rules and saying, okay, then I have to think about where I put my money to kind of punish the companies that I do not like. And the same goes for, as I said earlier, about working for companies that make an impact will force corporations to rethink what kind of purpose they actually have when they can't attract the talent that they need from this generation. So it's a bit playing on that argument that the market will solve it. So don't rely too much on the politicians, you know. As you might have heard, usually people who are economically on the right wing politically will argue that the market is the solution. So we can play a bit by that rule as well and make our consumption that way.
Yeah. And then one final thing I say on this is that it's a quote that I loved. I can't remember who it's from, otherwise I would cite them. But it's that every time you buy, you're voting for a business model.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So true. So
that is
true.
true. Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah. Wow. Well, that was very insightful, I feel.